I think we're ready to start. I'm Barbara Cecil, and I want to welcome you to the second taping of the oral history of West Milton. So we have another distinguished panel, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about West Milton. Thank you. We'll start with you, Norman.
Well, my name is Norman Stigle. Born and raised here in West Milton. Any kind of luck, I'll die here and wind up over the hill with the rest of my family. In 1937, I was born at 39 North Main Street, at home, between Billy and Devon J. and Kay and Zonell Wirtz. Now, south of them was Doris and Phyllis Oburn. Across the street was Carolyn Kress. So I was the young kid on the block, so to speak. And as I mentioned in my notes that I took here, I always seem to be in somebody's way. And I look at this group up here, and I'm still the youngest kid in the block here, so nothing changes.
I'm not going to say I'm the oldest.
There are a lot of things here that I could go over. When I first read through my notes, it took almost a half an hour, and so I'm not going to take that much time. But I would say that my great-grandfather, John Stigle, came to Ohio in 1854 with most of his children. Now, I didn't know this until just recently. Well, within the last 40 years. But when they say you're either related to everybody or everybody knows you, in a small town like this, that's true. And so growing up in West Milton has been a source of pleasure for me. I actually live now on North J Street and have never lived more than 4 blocks from where I was born, with the exception of a couple of years I spent in the U.S. Army. So as far as memories are concerned, I don't really know how to go through this. I didn't remember that I had quite so many memories until I started remembering. And it also came to mind that a lot of things that you remember are best left unremembered when you're on television. And I would call your attention to my little friend here in front of me. And this is kind of the way with my life. And on his shirt it says, "The older I get, the better I used to be." And that holds true. One of my fond memories here is the gentleman over here on the corner, Jerry Carnes. Do you remember plastering my house on North J Street?
Oh, yeah.
I've had a lot of people say that they love the walls. They almost look like they're plastered. So, but we've grown up here. I just celebrated my 73rd birthday, and Joyce and I will be married 50 years here in October, be the good Lord willing. As far as remembering, when we moved up to North J Street, I spent more time with my Uncle Harry, actually my great Uncle Harry, than I did my grandfather. And it was his age group that made a big impression on my life. And as I mentioned in my notes here, the older people seem to have a lot more patience than we have nowadays. I know the kids tend to get into things and do things that are irritating, but I have that sense of remembering that it didn't seem to bother people. with one exception. Now, right across Front Street, as you go up Main Street towards Hamilton, I threw a candy bar wrapper, and I'm not sure who it was. I think it might have been Mrs. McCorkle's yard. And by the time I got up to the corner of Hamilton and Main Street, where my grandmother Stigle lived, she was out there on the porch, and I marched back down and picked up the trash. I was instructed then that you don't throw trash around. Grandma was from the old school. You'd see her out every morning with her little dustpan, coal bucket, and broom, sweeping up the gutter and the sidewalk and anything that might happen to fall into her yard. You just don't see that anymore. But some of the businesses here, across the street from Grandma's Stickle there, was Hugh Garrison's house. I'm not sure who lives there now, but it's north of Hamilton Street on Main Street. Now, Hugh ran the A&P store downtown, and he used to always save me orange crates. Now, back in the old days, before cardboard was invented, you used to get your fruit shipments and everything in soft white pine slatted crates. And Mr. Garrison would always save those for me if I didn't happen to get down there. Usually I was down there once a day anyway, but if the trash had come, he'd still save them back for me. And on up the street at Ford's drugstore, B.J. Ford would save cigar boxes for me. Now, by now you've gotten the opinion maybe that I'm a kind of a junk collector, but I've still got some of the cigar boxes that B.G. Ford gave me way back when. And if there's only one or two cigars left in the box, he would lay them out on the side and give me the box anyway. So, but that was the kind of a town West Milton used to be. And I think before I remember too much more here, I will let somebody else remember a few things, because I'm sure a lot of us have have shared memories.
I'm Lenora Martindale. Kenny was supposed to be here, but he backed out. And he worked on some of the businesses that have been here in town, and which we made a list of. And his grandfather and his father started a store in Pattytown, which is northwest of Laura. And they gave the first coupon out, and that was in 1915. And then his dad, and he built the store in 1945. And then Kenny bought it from his mother in 1971 after his dad passed away. But when he was a young boy, he told me the things that he did and some of the businesses that were in town. And he told me that he had worked for Bessie Coate at the West Milton Inn. And when he got old enough to drive, he was her chauffeur. And he said, I chauffeured her everywhere she wanted to go. But he worked at a lot of the different places, and he told me he remembered working in the bowling alley up above where it says the Buzz Theater, down where Johnny Bookwalder's wood shop is. And he said he'd go set pins up at night. And then across the street was Norris's, and he would go down in the basement and wash cars. And his favorite hangout was Harry Harris's Bakery. He baked up the best rolls and bread and things, and he said, I loved going in there and getting the hot bread. But we made up this list, and hope that there's enough for all of you. And I've got a few pictures back when Mr. and Mrs. Engel had a grocery right next to where our grocery is. And it was sitting out on the front of their house, and they sold gas from there also. And so there's a picture here with their little store, and then with our store next to it. And on the next page, there's his grandpa and his dad had the old truck, and they would send a postcard out to people. We will be in your area on Thursday. Have your order ready. And so they would go out and sell their wares from their truck. And back here in the back of the truck, you can see 2 crates, and they would put live chickens back in there in case anyone wanted a chicken. And there's a picture of his dad, and then a picture of Harry Harris from the bakery. And then on the last page is a picture of Martindale's with Kenny and his dad. But we had fun researching, I know we left out probably quite a few businesses, but most of this, we've researched it out, and it was surprising to me because I didn't move here until 1945, and all the business places that had been here. And I remember the A&P that he talked about, and I remembered the Western Auto Store. It was right next to the West Milton Record, and a few things like that. So, but I enjoy living here.
I didn't prepare a thing. I'm going to be taking my nap right now. I was born here 76 years ago. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Lilly and Dom. Thank you. And I was born in a horrible-looking green apartment house. I was wondering if anybody remembered it, on Main Street, next to the Church of Christ.
On the corner?
Right on the corner. Saders lived behind us, behind me, and Finfrock's across the street. And there was 2 apartments in there. And the people who, of course, I was living there with my mother, my father, my grandma, my aunts, and my 2 sisters. And I had, and I probably had 2 or 3 bedrooms at the most in that place. But my neighbors who lived in the same apartment house was Mary Wheelock and Bob Wheelock, who became Bob Saltmarsh. Yeah. And hey, I remember bowling alley downtown. I think 3 lanes, 2 lanes, 3 lanes. Remember? I remember the drugstore, Ford's drugstore. I mean, all these things that you're talking about. But hey, I'm not here to make a speech. If you want to make a speech, go ahead, sweetheart. But I will say this. He mentioned 50 years married. Until my husband passed away 3 months ago, I was married over 60 years.
That's a good goal.
That's right. And we didn't kill each other in all the time.
My name is Evelyn Brown, and of course I was born here. I had no affiliation, of course, until my grandparents from Lancaster, Ohio, came to West Milton to operate the Pearson House. That's when it was a hotel. And of course, they had no restaurant at that time. They just operated the Pearson House. That's when my mother came to Milton. Then, of course, she met my father, who was a shoe repairman, and he worked in a Layer's store upstairs repairing shoes. And they met at Overlook Park, and of course, then naturally, they got married, and I was the only one in my family. I lost a brother when I was 5 years old, and I can remember staying all night with Doc Pearson's wife. And of course, my dad repaired shoes all his life. He was raised in the OS&SO home. And when they were 16, they were put out at the end of the lane at the OS&SO home in Xenia, with a suitcase full of clothes, and they were on their own. They just had to do what they could do, but they did learn a trade, and of course, that's what he did all the rest of his life. And then, of course, the fellow I married was Ned Brown, and when we got married, his father was in the milk business when we got married. I brought 2 milk bottles, glass milk bottles down there on the table that's got Brown's Dairy on it. And then I had some other things laying there that my dad had in the shoe business. And of course, I've lived here all my life. Where I live now, I've lived there 64 years. And my husband passed away 5 years ago in July. And where I live now, I've lived there 64 years. So, and as far as Milton, I was downtown most of the time. And I can remember Ned's grandmother lived right next to your grandparents. And she, I don't know whether anybody remembers the athletic or the basketball coach, Fred Bushmeyer. But he roomed and boarded with Mrs. Miller. And I can always remember him, you know, and of course Ned played basketball and was very close to him. And then I can also remember a time when we had another teacher at West Milton who was named Mr. Nill. He was only at Milton for 1 year. I don't know whatever happened to him, but he roomed and boarded at our house. I lived right side the schoolhouse all the time I was going to school. Naturally, when I was hungry at recess, which I always was, my mother would always bring a cookie out to me, you know, and all that. I was kind of spoiled that way, you know. And I have so many memories, you know, I could just talk and talk and talk about all the memories there, but it is very interesting that both sides of my family were affiliated here, you know, and I could talk a long time, but anyway, I'll pass it on over to Beverly.
Well, I'm Beverly Helsinger. I was Beverly Swank for 19 years. I've lived in West Milton. I've only lived here for 77 years. I was born in Kessler. But I just made a list of the places mainly that I could remember and the things I could remember. Remember the spot when it was down on Washington Street, which I don't think it was called Washington Street at the time. It was the back alley.
I still call it that.
But the spot is where we hung out as high school kids. Tommy Lair, I remember him. Was he the only mailman in town?
I think
He's
so.
the only one I remember.
Yeah.
But I can remember him sitting on our yard. We had a bit of a hill in front. And he would stop there to rest and have a cigarette periodically when he was delivering the mail. Tommy was a good person. I remember Saturday nights downtown. You could hardly walk down the streets. Hearst Restaurant, which is where the real estate and that stuff is across the little alley from Croplands. But on Saturday night, there was a little, I'll call it a combo. It was kind of a band that played on top of on that marquee. And the crowds were, you can't imagine the crowds downtown on Saturday night. I also remember I got 25 cents allowance, cost 15 cents to go to the Roxy, and a dime for a soda at Ford's drugstore.
Yes, that's it.
And popcorn.
Never got popcorn, didn't have any money for popcorn. Let's see. Also, Roxy Theater had a bank night, and you didn't even have to go in, you could buy a ticket. And I hate to tell this on my father, forgive me, but he would buy a ticket and then go over to who? Red Dicky. Red Dicky's restaurant, and I think he played pool until the movie was out, because they would call the name and then you could check and see if you'd won the jackpot.
That's a bloody bucket.
That's what we
Yes,
call it.
yeah,
We called it the Bloody, of course from Bud Hoover's place.
Well, yeah, but that was after that.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Bloody
also,
bucket, yeah.
that bowling alley, I think that was duck pins, not regular
That
bowling.
could be, I just remember being in
Is
there
that-
once or twice with
wasn't it
Bob.
duck
Bob took
pins?
me there, Bobby, we like took Bob. took me
Because the
there.
balls weren't as big, I remember.
I don't remember that.
Okay, I remember free movies behind
I
the
remember
building and
that.
loan.
I remember that, yeah.
You could, I don't even know what night, but I know it was light when you got there and dark when you went home. We used to walk. Before I ever went to school, I was allowed to walk down to Brown's grocery store, which cost, it was 71 at the time.
That's right.
But I can remember one time we were walking home from there, a friend of mine, Mary Jo Wellbaum. We were walking home from the grocery. She wanted me to carry her change. I wanted her to carry it, so she threw it away. Remember the ice house? The ice truck, we used to get on the back of that.
Definitely used to.
My Uncle Bud drove the truck, and he'd let us have a little chunk of ice
Yes,
periodically.
yes.
The library up above the old firehouse.
mhm.
And
Remember very
Elizabeth
well.
Cornell,
That's it. Mrs.
wasn't she the
Cornell.
librarian?
Yep.
Yes, Mrs. Edith.
I remember so many stores, 3 furniture stores, 2 barber shops, the bakery.
Anderson's
I remember
Barber
walking
Shop,
home from
yeah.
school and stopping there, and for 5 cents you could get us cream horn
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
and double dip ice cream cones. You know those double cones?
Yes, 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 yes.
Gasoline stations. Do you remember Park Snyder?
Another name, that's it.
Oh, he used to get so mad across the street. I think his name was Roy Mast.
There was.
He lived in the big brick house.
Yeah, tore it down.
And that, he had a parrot.
That's right.
And that parrot would whistle and say, "Hey, Park," all the time, and Park would get,
Oh.
he'd also get upset when we'd stop as teenagers with our car and have him put a quarter's worth of gasoline in.
That's it, that's it. That's right.
It was a little
It was
over a
only
gallon at the
17 cents a
time.
gallon then.
Oh, let's see. I was thinking of the grocery, Her's Restaurant. Remember Wag Her?
Oh, gosh.
With his
Wag
cigar?
and Ben.
And Ben. I don't know if it was Wag or Ben, but the story goes that St. John Transportation came to town then, and someone stopped and asked one of them if he knew what time the bus left for Dayton, and he said, "Yeah." I think most of us worked at the West Milton Inn. If you ever worked for Bessie Cote, I always said you could work for anybody. She was a tough person.
Yes, she was.
Good experience.
That-
Roller skating at Overlook.
All the time.
I remember going up there to skate in the afternoon. And I can remember one time in particular wearing a dance costume that I had worn for a review. Do you remember that? I want to think her name was Virginia, had a dance
Yes, it was her
right
daughter.
beside the record office. I think everybody took tap dance.
Yep, that's right.
PTA. PTA used to have plays at the high school when it was really, it was a community play. I can remember my father singing in them one time. And I can remember they had one, when all 12 grades were in the McKinley building, I can remember they had some kind of plays on that main floor. It was big enough. Do you remember, Nadine? I think you sang in one of them.
I remember that.
Parkside. Oh, the warehouse over out on J Street. I don't know if you remember the old orange tobacco warehouse. My father worked there before he was drafted. He was a tobacco buyer for the Caswell-Sweaver Company. And of course, I'm quite familiar with that place because on Sunday afternoon sometimes he would have a group and we'd go in and roller skate on that concrete floor. I started first grade in West Milton, went all through school. My mother went to school here. My children all went to school here. I have grandchildren in school here.
Yep.
I have great-grandchildren in school here. I really like West Milton.
Yeah.
You done?
I'm finished.
I don't have anything else to say.
Come on, we were neighbors.
Okay.
I love it.
Well, my name is not Jerry Carnes, it's Ralph Gerard Carnes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I know some of you know that, but anyway. Anyway, and I didn't know there was going to be a audience here. Did you charge admission? Huh? Well, get some money out of it. Norman mentioned plastering. I've gotten plastered a few people in the audience out there, too. Dick Markley and Nadine and Barb Sitterman. And anyway, I have got a few things to say. The Her's Restaurant, she brought that up. Do you ever remember Spinney's popcorn stand? I didn't see it listed.
Oh,
on it.
yes, oh,
It
yes.
was on the side of Max Litter, Burns Salsa's place.
Yeah, Kenny talked
That
about
was- yeah.
that.
And I used to work at the drugstore. I carried papers out of there. And at the time that I was doing that, the first issues of Superman and Batman and all of them, and I had all of them. Dick Markley might have some of them left, I don't know. But anyway, they're worth some money today if you had them in mint condition. And when the World War II broke out, Esty Hamrick and I was both carrying paper, and we went out on the street and said, "Extra, extra, Japs bombed Pearl Harbor." Then nobody can forget the big 1950 snowstorm.
Yep.
That's the biggest snowstorm I remember in West Milton since a kid. I wasn't born here, but I was born in Dayton, but I started school and went through all 12 grades. And my dad also went to school here, and he and Stewie Broomball played football together. I don't know. They always said Dad was better than Stewie, but he never got to go to college. teen center. You mentioned the spot. But there was a teen center
Upstairs.
up above Wirtz's Hardware at this
That's
time.
right, up at the hardware store. That's
And I've
right.
got my name and Maxine's up there on the wall someplace. I never took Marilyn up there. She knows that anyway. On Halloween, it used to be shut down in 48, and the street was full of the
Yeah.
shoe polish all over you and
Yeah.
confetti, and
Yep,
it was
yep,
bad
yep.
as Bradford up there.
Come in my days and buy shoes.
She mentioned,
I remember Halloween that you had a fire out at your,
they rented boats
You're
up at the skating
exactly
rink. I don't know if everybody did that or not, but
and I was out
rented
there.
boats and we rented boats and swam in the river
We
down
had
there.
out there when we heard where it was.
You could walk about anywhere on the
Right.
still
I
water.
couldn't get out there.
I remember it very well.
Oh, there's something.
Yep. I was probably
Oh,
about
4th of July used to be fun. You could buy fireworks all over town. Today, you think you get hurt.
Yep, yep.
I ain't afraid of getting hurt too much. Smitty's popcorn stand,
I remember that.
but
Yep.
Cecil Coate used to, it was brought about Coate Vault, but he used to raise tomatoes out there across the street on the farm. And we picked tomatoes at 10 cents a hamper and all you could eat.
They probably lost money on that.
Yeah, I lost money. Yeah.
Oh, heck.
Well, I've been married 60 years almost too,
Yep.
so,
Yep, yep.
but my wife's not very good, so
No,
I can't be away from her too long, but we're appreciative.
well, I see you every morning walking your dog.
Yeah. That's about all I have. Thank you all. Appreciate you being here. Did the audience get to talk?
Oh, I wanted to add something too. Phyllis.
Yes.
Taylor. Fitterball. Weren't you the postmistress?
Oh, yes.
No.
She worked in the
I
post
worked
office
in the
a
free
long
postmaster.
time.
She did all the work.
Postal
You did, well,
supervisor, I
that's the
guess.
first I remember you
Yeah,
being.
down on the alley.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yep, yep, yep. She has a good birthday. Her son.
Same as
Her
yours?
son, no, my son and her have the same birthday.
Same birthday.
It's an important date.
It's very important.
Sure is. I used to work in this building alone. It used to call Lucas Motor Sales. It was a Ford agency. I worked in here 2 years.
Oh, my God.
Around 1937, 8.
She was about 4 years old then.
Oh, you don't have to remind
Does
me of
anybody
things like
remember
that.
Coates's department store?
Oh, my gosh.
Very much so.
They sold everything.
Everything, they did.
You go in the front door, over to the right was the men's, over to the left was
right.
the counter.
Yes, yes.
That's right.
And clear in the back was clothes.
That's before Miller's.
Oh, yes.
Okay, okay. I'm
Mother
trying to
bought
think.
my school clothes there.
Okay, that's right.
And she'd have $10 and come home with 5 dresses.
That's right, that's right.
Everybody knows where Miller's department store is.
Exactly.
Well, when Norman and I first got married, I'm a greenie, I've only been here for about 50 years. But we needed, I needed a dress or something, and Norman said, well, go down to Coates's department store. We lived up on Minor Street at the time. So Betty, my daughter, and I, we walked almost clear down to the banks, south of town, and clear back. And Norman came home from work, and he said, well, did you get what you needed down there? And I said, no, I walked clear down to the banks, and I didn't see anything but Miller's department store. He said, well, that's Coates's. I didn't buy anything. So to make a longer story shorter, I did the same thing trying to find Petoskey's shoe store. And I walked clear down to the banks and got back, and he said, well, it isn't Petoskey's anymore, it's Yunt's. So I could walk downtown anywhere.
That's right. Where's the John's
But
after
I've known all these people, and Phyllis was I heard, was the prettiest woman in town.
She still is.
All the young boys were in love with her. I won't tell you where I heard that. And she still was pretty.
No one talked about the big fire we had.
About the what?
The big fire.
Oh, yeah, Brown's Grocery. Yeah.
Oh, I'd forgotten
Yeah, I
about that.
don't remember that.
We had one too.
Had someone talk
Halloween,
about
I
that
remember
earlier?
yours, because we
Did
were
you
out, a
guys
bunch of
talk
us
about it?
kids got hopped in the car and went out there.
Halloween night,
Uh,
it burnt
I
complete
was
loss.
probably about 14 then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't you remember that every Halloween, in front of the Citizens National Bank
There was
downtown,
always an outhouse.
that outhouse appeared every
On the,
Halloween?
there was a water fountain there.
Yeah.
And it was all, usually it was over the water fountain.
Every year. I finally found out who did it.
I never knew who did
We
it.
all did, yeah. Never tell, no.
We had a bunch of rowdy boys.
It wasn't Roddy Boy.
Do you remember what the sign said?
No.
What does,
Mayor's office.
okay.
He's right, mayor's office.
Well, they
that's
used to
right.
put one up on the school building, the McKinley School Building,
Yes.
too, every Halloween.
Carry a Volkswagen up there a lot of times.
Of course, there was a lot of them little outhouses around
You
there.
remember the cannon out on the schoolhouse?
Yes.
And they gave it during World War II.
Yes,
I
yes.
hated that.
Yes,
Part of West Milton, that cannon. I
it
talking
sure
about
was. I
there.
was over there sitting and playing around there half the time.
Yes,
You people have read my notes here.
talking about all that kind of stuff.
Well, the scrap drive,
They took everything.
when they took the Civil War cannon,
Yeah,
the
in front of the,
stack of cannonballs,
Exactly.
there
That's right.
were bed springs and car parts
I
and
know it.
Yep.
farm machinery and everything piled up
Yeah.
there, and it all
Of course,
disappeared.
we go back with the stamps that you had to have when you, during World War II. You
Oh,
couldn't
my
buy this
gosh,
and you couldn't
yes.
buy that without your, I think I might have some of them somewhere at home, but I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah, you had
What'd you call them?
red stamps.
Yeah,
Red
what do you
stamps
call,
for
what
meat
kind of
and-
call
What
stands?
did you call them? They didn't call them stamps.
What
No,
were they called?
That's it,
Ration,
ration stamps.
ration.
Ration. Somewhere at home, I started going through stuff, finding all this good stuff.
Oh.
I
Do you
forgot some
remember
of them
Walter
somewhere.
and Ethel Barnhart and
Oh,
their
my,
daughter
yes.
Ruth?
oh, yes.
Yeah, good friends of my grandma's, my grandma Shaw's.
Ruth was blind and had a
Yes.
Doberman CNI dog,
Yep,
and
very well. Used to spend a lot of time up there.
she was my babysitter for a long time when I was there on Main Street. You couldn't get by with anything with, between Ruth and the dog, we were pretty well
I
corralled.
remember them very well, and I remember where they lived there, yeah.
Well, we know you're all from West Milton because, and as the first group that came, because you're saying the same thing.
That's right.
That's
That's exactly, well, what else can you remember? You know, if we're all born and raised here, we all remember the same things.
You all brought back different things though.
Really?
Yes.
You know, I can see that the memories would be with, because we're all within 10 years of each other, or 5 years birthday-wise of each other.
What about the mayors? What do you remember about the mayors of West Milton?
Harvey Minnick?
Yeah, Harvey was there a long time.
Actually, I never paid much attention.
Me
To be
neither.
very
Mayor
honest.
most
Well, when
of
you're
the
younger,
time.
you don't pay
No,
much
you
attention.
don't, really.
I was trying to think.
Callaghan?
Yeah, Mr. O'Callaghan.
Yeah, but we were older then.
Yeah, I'm trying to think,
I
when
mean,
I was a
wait-
little
The
girl
youngest
growing up,
mayor
I
of
don't
West
remember
Milton
who
at
was
that
a
time
mayor.
was Marshall
I mean, from the
Walker.
time I was
He
born
was
till I was
37 years old
15,
and
16, I don't
blind.
remember who was
He
a
was
mayor.
blind mayor in West Milton.
A blind mayor?
And he would walk the streets of West Milton and you wouldn't even know he was blind.
Hmm,
You could tell when he came to a sidewalk in, he would kind of feel there for the
huh.
curve.
I
and
don't
then go
remember that.
across.
What was his name, Jake?
Marshall Walker.
I don't
He was my
remember.
uncle. That's
I lived
why-
way up on North Main Street. I
I
probably
don't remember that at all.
Marshall lived above the telephone exchange.
I remember the telephone
Oh.
exchange.
Yeah.
Well,
I do too.
I think Winfred Martindale was the mayor one year.
I don't remember that.
I forget what year that was.
You remember Winford's dad, Walter?
Yeah.
Second gear Walter.
Walter was totally deaf, and he had no idea what gear his car was in. Whatever gear he left it in, that's what he
Oh,
started
my
it in.
gosh.
Lived right up north of us on J Street. We'd hear him come down the street there in first or second gear with clear to the floor. They were just grinding.
oh, yeah.
Oh, my.
Those gears just sound like they were gonna come out through the,
I've told this story before, Norman, but you probably haven't heard it. And that's that I was in Red Dickie's, a bunch of us kids or older, and we came out, got in my car, and I backed it up, and across the street is Ed Hamrick's garage, and right where the garage door was is no parking. And I backed right into somebody's car who had parked across that garage door. And so I hit it right in the middle of the car. And the guy says, "Run, nobody saw us." I said, "No, I'm gonna pull up here and park. And then we'll go in, I've got insurance, we'll find out whose car it is and tell them who hit him." And so I pulled away from the wreck and went up, and out come Mr. Walter Martindale. He got in his car and backed into the same car. So I figured, I'm off the hook.
Oh, my gosh.
So we got out, talked to Mr. Martindale, went in, found out whose car it was, brought him out, and Mr. Martindale took care of it.
You talk about Ed Hamrick's garage there. When I was living at 39 North Main Street, Ed Hamrick was down across from
North Street.
it was a bar at the time, I think, or put the bar in, I guess, after the fire, didn't they?
Well,
It was there right behind Dr. Stout's office.
Yeah, Ed Hamrick, yeah.
And Ed was on the fire department. Walter Barnhart was on the fire department across the street from us. Bill J. was on the fire department, old Bill.
Yeah.
My dad, Grandpa Harvey, was on the fire department down on the corner of Hamilton and Main. And when the siren would go off, which was right behind our house there, I rattle the windows, and Ed would be the first one. He slept in his garage a lot of times, and he'd come around the corner there, and Walter Barnhart would come out one door, and Bill and Dad would go out the other door, and sometimes they'd be hanging on the side of the car, sometimes they'd get in, and if there was room, Grandpa would jump in down at Hamilton Street, and they'd go down to 48 and then down to the firehouse. Now, on the subject of the firehouse, you may not be aware that my great-great-grandfather built that. It was the first mercantile building in West Milton, the first brick mercantile building. And it's been added to quite a bit.
but Norman, speaking of your grandfather and his house and where it was located, he had a professional croquet court in the backyard. Were you old enough to remember that?
Behind the second house he built there, oh yeah.
Yeah, that was a great croquet court.
It was a croquet court with a curb all the way around it. It was right next to Perry Vor's plumbing shop there on the Miami Street side, but it had a grape arbor that went up and across cables, and it really wasn't much good for a croquet court because the wasps would get in the grapes and you couldn't stand to be out there without getting stung for as long as the grapes would be ripe.
I know I played a lot of croquet on that court with your cousin Nevin Dryden.
Nevin, yeah.
You couldn't, when you play poison, you know, now if you play poison out in somebody's yard, they'll hit the ball a mile away. There you couldn't get away from that stone, that concrete curb.
It had ground crushed limestone for a base.
Level, completely level.
It was just as level as a sidewalk.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know that.
Where
Never heard of a professional.
Ruth and Devon J. built up there beside what was Walter Barnhart, used to be E.P. Miller's funeral home. And I don't know whether E.P. had any, was any relation to Roy Miller or not, but
Don't think so.
it was, the building was a total shambles by the time Devon bought it. I think he had left it to the Masonic home in Springfield.
Was that where Peck Miller lived?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when Devon started tearing it down, we just threw everything in the basement and set fire to it. And of course, we threw a little more wood than we probably should have there because the fire got so big and hot that it cracked the windows on Ethel Barnhart's house. But we found somebody's skull in there, and it was, it had putty built up around the cheekbones, and I guess it was an undertaker's tool, and it wound up in the fire pit too with everything else, but I often wondered who that was. Somebody mentioned the drinking fountain downtown. Does anybody know where the drinking fountain is now?
I didn't know they had any. Didn't know they had any
I know
now.
there was a drinking fountain right
Oh.
there.
Right there at the
Right
center
there.
of the
Right
bank.
there.
Yes.
Right along the alley there beside,
Beside the
eyeglasses.
optometrist,
Yeah.
yes, I do
Yeah, it was
remember
right
that.
there. It was
Where is
the
it
one
now?
you stepped on and,
Well, I thought maybe
Probably
Jimmy
in Lawrence
Sarver
Garage.
would,
oh, you think he has it?
I thought maybe Jimmy Sarver would put it up someplace around
Oh,
the
Huh.
roller rink, but as far as I know, it's still laying up there under
wasn't there a
his.
drinking fountain up there by the creek on Miami Street?
Yes.
Right there where we in the hall, yeah, there was one there.
Right.
too.
Yeah, there was,
We had 2 drinking fountains.
there
I
was.
don't remember the one.
I remember that one.
Well, the town tore out the one there by the old Citizens National Bank. I had a little note in here that I've had an account with the U.S. Bank for 68 years. And
Probably sucked on it.
one of these times, you'd think that they would not ask for identification to do some business.
Of course, it hasn't been U.S. Bank forever.
Well,
Citizens National.
it was Citizens National and First National. And
Yeah,
there's been
exactly.
about several different transitions,
Yes.
but
Huh.
Well, Beverly shows her age, tells her age, not shows it tells her age, when she mentions back alley instead of Washington Street.
That's right.
Because that's exactly what we call it, a
That's
back
right.
alley. And Market Street was not Market Street, it was Butter
Oh,
Road.
Butter
Butter
Road.
Road.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
Butter
Butter
Road,
Road.
That's right, Butter Road.
exactly right.
Why was it called Butter Road?
I don't know.
We
You
never
supposed-
found out
was
that.
Why is it
someone
called
selling
Market
butter
Street?
out
That's
that
true,
road?
that's right.
Farmers.
Why did they change,
Like it was butter
when
on
did it change from butter to market?
I mean, it doesn't have a market either.
That's right.
Well, and then you had new plats that came into town. We had the Ingram plat.
And the Ingrams lived on that
It's
road.
Those houses along Butter Road.
Yeah.
That's right, there were
That's
two
right.
Ingrams that lived on that road.
Well, I mean, can most of you remember when Harry Sexar's garage
Sure do.
was on the back alley?
Yep,
Yep.
yep.
Harry built up the first wrecker in town, welded up the frame and everything, did it all himself, and eventually moved up to where Von Arnold was,
That's
across
right.
from Martindale's
Yeah, that's exactly.
store.
That's where he was.
And Harry was a great guy. I listed him as one of my friends. I also put him down when I was in New Mexico in the Army. I had to apply for a top secret clearance, and so I listed Harry as one of my people they could contact. They never said anything to Harry, but the FBI checks everybody that had anything to do with Harry. And that was the funny thing about it, because Harry wanted to know why everybody was checking up on him.
Funny.
But he,
What I want to know is, did they give you the top secret clearance?
oh yeah. Yeah, I almost got in trouble over that. But
Oh, that's funny.
Harry told a story about a gentleman coming into his garage there on Hay Street across from Martindale's. And a gentleman in a suit came in there and he asked if there was a sex hour there. And Harry said, I'm not sure, but it sounds like a good idea.
That's funny.
And Evelyn, with her father, Louis Moore, he did more than shoes, because when I was in the Boy Scouts, I needed a canvas, something that was waterproof, but I didn't have to put a tent up, that I could just lay it down. And so I got this big piece of canvas and I took it into Louis and I told him what I wanted. I wanted to be able to sleep my sleeping bag under this thing, let it pour down rain, and I'm not going to get wet. So he sewed me up as a waterproof sleeping bag. He put grommets in it with a rope that went through the grommets and pull it up tight once I got in. And I could just lay there and let it rain. So he did that as well as shoes.
I know, and he made a pair of shoes for a man up in Ludlow Falls. He wore a size 27. I will not forget that. I saw it. Yeah,
Paul
he made them.
Bunyan.
He made
About a pound
them.
and a half, isn't it?
But he learned how to make shoes also over there at the OS&SO home, and I don't know how he did it, but he did it. He did it.
Do you remember Carrie Spittler down at Coates Department Store?
Oh, yes.
She would, but she was always, but she always dripped in jewels. I mean, at least it always seemed to me that she just,
Yeah.
I mean, she had rings on her fingers and,
She was happy all the
oh
time,
my
wasn't she?
goodness, yes.
Happy lady.
Happy person.
Oh, it was delightful.
Someone mentioned the price of gasoline, and I'm thinking of the price of medical care. If I
Oh.
could see Doc Pearson and get everything done, do his physical, tell him what was wrong with me and all that sort of thing, he would hand you a bunch of stuff to take with you. You didn't have to go to the pharmacy.
That's right,
You'd
that's
save
right.
$2.
That's true.
Didn't
Yeah.
your family live in the other side of our double house down there on Miami Street?
Yeah.
Yeah, I lived on the
Isn't that,
north side.
isn't that where you lived when your father passed away?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
Yes.
I remember that.
Do you remember doctors made house calls?
Oh, my gosh, yes.
Sidewalk.
I mean, if you had a sick child, you didn't have to worry about taking them, they would come.
That's right.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
Yeah, I'm walking today because Doc Stout made house calls.
Yep,
They
okay.
all did.
I threw my knee out of 1969, as I recall it. I was shoveling dirt out in the front yard where we live now, and I raised the shovel up and stomped on it as hard as I could to get penetration in the dirt, and I hit a rock about the size of your
gosh.
head. And my kneecap on my right leg popped out and was clear around behind my leg.
You made me
My,
go sick.
my knee was locked, and I'm laying on my back. And there's several stories on this. The funniest part of it was when Doc Stout came up there, he was just leaving the office, and he came up and asked me if I didn't have a kneecap on my right knee. And I said, well, I always thought I did. And he said, well, he couldn't find it. And he's fumbling around there, and I'm in agony. I mean, tears streaming down my cheeks. I mean, it pained like I hadn't had for a while. And he reached around behind, finally found my kneecap behind my leg, and worked it around through the tendons and everything, and got it back on the front of my knee where it was supposed to be, and just that quick, the pain went away. And he wanted me to come in the next day. Well, the next day my knee was about that big
Oh,
around,
gosh.
and he sent me to an orthopedic surgeon in Dayton. And one of the things he said, when you get a little older now, he said, you're probably going to have some trouble with arthritis. And so it's been quite a few years ago, but I told him this before he passed away. And I said, well, I must be getting a little older. He says, why is that? I said, well, I've got arthritis in my right knee. And I said, that's what you said was going to happen way back when.
Yeah, yeah.
But he also did some needlework on my wrist when I went through a window down at school. And 15 stitches underneath and 16 on the outside there. And he was a great surgeon, I'll tell you. We were blessed with a lot of quality medical.
Really? We could use another one here in town now.
How about Max Laird? Does anybody remember Max?
I love Max Laird. Everybody knew Max Laird.
I went down there one time, and Max was shorthanded. He worked there all by himself. He was running from the cash register at the front of the store to the meat market at the back of the store, and there's a little old lady.
Probably our age.
Yeah. Well, little old ladies, we weren't little old ladies then. We are now. But that's
I'm
right.
assuming she was of the German Baptist persuasion because she had her little bonnet on, and she was back there waiting, and Max was taking care of somebody at the register, and I walked up, and Max was hurrying as hard as he could there, and you know Max's shuffle there, and I asked him if he had a stone in his shoe, and he got back there, and that little old lady elbowed me in the ribs, and I couldn't hardly get my wind there. And she says, don't you know he's got arthritis?
Arthritis.
And
I love it.
the funniest part was Max standing there trying to keep a straight face.
He used to have a good joke to tell you.
Yeah.
Oh, he always had a story.
Max, don't you remember he had he took photographs too?
Oh, I got.
I mean,
got a
studio type.
picture at home
Yeah,
of
I do
me.
too.
Well, Max,
They're in that
Max,
double house on the corner where there's
Exactly.
nothing now.
That's right. There is nothing there. That's right. The parking lot. That's
You
right.
what?
He took our wedding picture.
Well, yeah,
did he?
he took a lot of
Nice
pictures.
album and everything.
he was the drum major of the band, of the very first band. He was a drum major, and he played a xylophone. I lived about 2 houses from him. You could hear him from our house practicing on the xylophone.
I didn't know that.
I didn't either.
Now, I was looking at the picture in my alumna book. I was trying to figure out who was the band director at that time.
Yoakum, was it Yoakum?
I don't know. His name, I was trying to figure it out because I didn't see his name there. I didn't see him there.
Yeah, I don't remember his first name, but
I remember Yoakum.
he must have been young because,
Pardon?
When Max was in the band,
That was-
Yoakum was,
Was later.
I think so
oh,
too.
Yoakum was,
Yoakum was.
I was a little
When
girl,
I was in school.
yeah.
But I looked at that picture of the whole band. My husband was in the first band. But I could not find out who the band director was according to that picture.
You recognize a lot of the people in that band. Harold Baker was in there.
Oh, yes.
And the outfit that Max wore, that was something.
That's the reason he was the drum major, because he was the head of it. I can remember that just as plain as can be.
You know, do you remember during World War II when in Doc Stout's office front yard, there was a great big sign that had listed on it all of the people must
Yeah.
have that
World War
were
II.
in service, and then the little star beside
Yeah,
those
when they
that
were
were
gone.
killed or whatever.
Yeah.
I wonder whatever
Forgotten
happened
about
to
that.
that.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy.
Uh-uh.
Makes you wonder if his kids have it. He had a couple kids.
Seems like that would have been
Right.
something that
That
should
was
have been
definitely-
saved.
Yeah.
Do you remember during World War II at school, we bought stamps for our bonds, and we
Man,
collected tinfoil and all kinds of
yes,
scrap metal.
yes.
We had the junior commandos.
We collected tax stamps too.
Yes, we did.
Oh,
Bundled
yes.
them up in hundreds,
Uh-huh.
and we got a rebate or something.
Sent them
on
to the
that.
state or
Sent them to
something.
the state and got money for school supplies.
Yeah,
Did you ever,
kind of like the lottery.
yeah, did you ever save, milkweed pods?
No.
Didn't have milkweeds.
Collected milkweed pods one year, they made them into K-pop for life preservers.
I didn't know that.
You people are reading my notes here, and I don't know how you're doing it.
Everything you talk about, it brings back memories of something else that you remember.
Well, or if you went to downtown Dayton, this was a dressed-up affair. You didn't go down in your everyday clothes. Your mother and whoever you went with,
Oh,
they
always
were all
dressed up.
dressed
That's
to
right.
the nines.
That's right.
You get on the bus
Yep.
and go down to
Yep.
downtown
That's what we
Dayton,
did.
go to Rike's.
And
Arc-
taking a movie.
Arcade, go to the arcade.
Cobb's Cafeteria.
Yeah, we're talking about West Milton.
No,
Downtown.
I can remember my mother
Take
would
the
go
bus
down there.
all the time.
She'd go down there and buy pig's feet and bring home to my dad every time she went down to Dayton. He loved pickled pig's feet. I couldn't
Well,
think.
Kugler's sold at the arcade, they're chickens.
Did they really? You remember Dutch Vore and his barber shop?
Remember the creamery where they,
Right side of the creamy on Hamilton
the
Street?
women gathered on Saturday night while the men were at the barber shop, I guess?
Well, in barbershops.
They were
you had-
lying both places.
Yeah, the barber shop downtown, my mother would give me money to go down and get Harry Timmons to cut my hair. And
Harry
instead
Timmons.
I'd go out
Yeah.
to
That's Potsdam.
Burley's in the streetcar and
Oh,
get it
that's
for a
right.
lot cheaper, you know.
That's
You
right.
have a little extra money.
That's
He
right.
said, boy, Timmons cut gave you a bad haircut.
Whatever happened to the streetcar?
I don't know, it was down there close to where you used to
Well, I know
live.
exactly. I lived in that block in
Yeah.
two different houses, three different
My
houses.
grandma's house was right there.
That's exactly right.
Not there
You look
anymore.
I
back
know
there
it.
now and the streetcar's not there and you wonder, where is that thing?
But you know, I don't know when it disappeared.
I don't know.
My son had his first haircut there.
He
I
used
had
to
my
cut
first
my
haircut
hair.
there.
They did you
I
well?
thought I had a cut.
Yeah,
Got
yeah.
my bob.
Real, that's
Yeah, I
right.
always went up
That is
there.
exactly
Who,
right.
who, Dutch Vore or somebody else? Who you talking used to cut your hair?
Hurley.
Hurley?
In the streetcar.
The streetcar behind the
Hurley's
house.
Barber
I remember
Shop,
that.
Right there on,
Yes.
what is
Yeah.
it, South Street or something like
I
that.
don't even.
All right
I
off
didn't
of
know it had a
Main.
name. I didn't know it had a
Yeah.
name.
So-
It does now.
That doesn't go straight
Just
through.
like Mulberry out,
Yeah, it
Mulberry
doesn't go
Alley or
through.
something. I never knew that had a
Yeah.
name.
Through though. Yeah, we lived in a couple houses along there. I played up and down that block.
Post office for years. Jerry, you worked in the post office for years. Do you have any post office stories?
Jerry, she's talking to you. You worked in the post office for a year. What is it?
Just just wondering if you had any post office.
Any post office stories from working there?
Phyllis knows all of them.
Well, I remember one, remember when Fred Anderson had the barber shop? Well, he was cutting hair on a stranger in town.
Oh,
And the fire whistle blew.
Only had to go.
And Kenny Johnson was the letter carrier, and he was delivering mail. He came into the barber shop, and Fred says, "I gotta go to the fire. Here, Kenny, you take over." And that stranger didn't know what was going on. He got his hair cut by a
Two different
mailman.
people.
Because the fireman could.
I love it, I love it, I love it, I love it. Yeah, that is a cute story.
Oh, that's good.
That is, that's very cute.
I could tell some, but I don't think I better.
Go on ahead.
Oh, yeah, we got one little kid here.
They can edit it out.
Is it a good one?
Oh,
Can you clean it up?
no. I can't even clean it up. Oh, God.
Okay, we
I
got.
had a lot of fun down there when Herb and I carried for Herb Johns
Yeah, her time.
as a sub for about 4 years before I went in the clerk, and that was interesting. Herb was quite a boy. He was,
I remember he was delivering to this one lady, I won't mention names, but he got a cherry pie.
oh,
Remember that one?
Uh-huh.
He came back and wanted to give it to any of us. This lady was not the cleanest.
she had a lot of cats.
Okay, oh, she had her cat, okay, yeah.
But he was very gracious, you know,
Yeah.
thanking her for the pie, but then he wanted to give it away to me or
That's
somebody.
funny, I love that.
I know, Clyde Hines one time dumped his billfold in the box outside the drop box. And I found it, and so I called him up. He come up and got it, and he never did thank anybody, so.
That sound like Clyde Hines.
Yeah.
Back there
Funny.
when, this was in the 40s, we were down there located where the old bank building was. And I think his name was Merlin Sandow, if you remember him.
Oh, yeah.
There was, they had a lockbox there at the post office. And Ben Herb,
Ben.
I think Ben was the dearest person, but anyway, he's always playing tricks on somebody. So there was a stray cat roaming around the post office, and he saw Merlin coming, and he stuck that cat in the box. And when he came and reached his hand in there to he felt the cat.
Oh, everybody scared me to death.
I grabbed Joyce Cater's hand one day and where the new was. She about had a fit in.
Oh, remember Cashner's Antiques? I'd forgotten about Cashner's Antiques.
Yeah,
You know, I look at some of those
Oh,
spaces and I can't think what was,
That's right.
how they were situated because
Yeah,
they,
it was in the building.
sometime while I was sleeping, they moved a lot of this stuff.
Right.
He slept a long time.
Well, it's like the ditches dry cleaners.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you know where Cashner got his antiques?
Or you went over to the dump was right across the river, wasn't it? Yeah.
Oh, God.
He had a barn back up where Whistlinger's production was, and it was just full.
Huh, Whistlinger's. Goes back here a little bit.
Didn't that Louis?
You want these back? You keep them?
Yeah. Didn't Louis Beeman live right next door when you lived there on the house side of me, or in our house, in that brick house? Didn't Louis Beeman live in there with part of his
I
family?
remember Grandpa living there.
What was his, I want to,
Louis Beeman, he was the janitor, he was the janitor at the schoolhouse. I remember him
That
living
was
there
my
part of
dad,
the
yeah.
time.
Okay.
I don't know whether
That
you
was
lived
my
there at the
dad.
time or not. Don't remember that.
I don't remember. He lived in the farm for years, and he moved into town, lived in the house right next to where we lived on the Main Street.
Main Street, he lived there in Miami Street, and some of his family, in fact, I think your folks lived there. Louis, what was your father's name?
Hank, Henry, Hank.
Okay, that was another part of your family then.
No, Hank was my father.
Yeah.
I always
Louis
was
was
fascinated with Larry's shoe store because they had those ladders that.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, I know. That's right.
where was that?
You just moved them up and down.
Larry's shoe store,
Yeah,
Larry's brother's shoe store.
yeah.
Uh-huh. Wasn't that upstairs?
Howard and Frank Blair.
Oh, I just remember Louis.
Meeting adjourned.
And Howard Lair.
Oh, yeah.
Howard Lair was one of them too, wasn't
Well, there was Hermie there.
Howard was over Hermie.
Yeah.
He could get it for you in those
he?
days.
That's right, I remember Herman.
They lived in that nice house on the corner there. Big house on the corner.
Hermie got my bicycle through some sort of wholesale catalog that he had access to.
Great.
Thank you all very, very much. It's been very enjoyable.
It's been fun for me too.
Thank all of you. Thank you for participating. We really appreciate it, so thank you very much.
When are you gonna have the next one, Barb?
June the 8th.
June the 8th?
That's what I might have on my calendar.